Oscar Jenkins, obviously this Australian who's now a prisoner of Russia, essentially been sentenced in, well, the usual lack of real democratic process, but essentially as a mercenary. Have you been given any indication from either Ukraine or Russia that he could be part of a prisoner swap if peace does occur in that war?
Well, look, I'm not going to speculate on that, but what I would say in respect of Oscar Jenkins, firstly, we condemn the sentence which has been handed down in relation to Oscar Jenkins by Russia. This was a sham trial which handed down this sentence. Oscar Jenkins should be treated as a prisoner of war, and all the rights that go with that under international humanitarian law should be provided by Russia to Oscar Jenkins. That's what we expect of the Russian government, and we are very concerned for Oscar Jenkins. As I say, we very much condemn the sentence which has been handed down in relation to Oscar Jenkins, and we will continue to advocate on his behalf.
What's your view on an Australian like that, who's obviously feeling very strongly about defending Ukraine in its time of need? Is that someone you see as brave?
Well, we don't encourage people to go to Ukraine in the context of it being a war zone, and the government's made that position very clear. Oscar Jenkins, though, is an Australian citizen, and we will continue to advocate on his behalf. And as I said, we regard him as a prisoner of war in these circumstances, and we expect all the rights that are afforded to prisoners of war to be applied by Russia to him.
Okay, I want to talk about superannuation tax, this tax of unrealised capital gains. An economist, senior economist at ANZ, has said that a 22-year-old beginning work today, half of that cohort, so those obviously younger would be even higher, half of them would ultimately be subject to this tax. This is, of course, because it's not indexed. What is the argument to have no indexation at all on this?
Well, across the tax system, we have thresholds which aren't indexed, and that's the way in which our tax system operates. We have put in place this measure. It was announced 2 years ago. It's been in front of the Parliament for a fair proportion of the time since then. It's something that we've taken to the election. There's a mandate for it. It does apply to a very small number of superannuants, about 0.5%. Of superannuants this applies to. And for those people, they are still getting a concession. It's just not the extensive concession that existed beforehand. And it is an important measure in terms of making its contribution to the budget bottom line. So, we're moving forward in relation to this. This has been something which has been in the public domain for a long time.
One of the big discussions around this that a lot of people have concerns about is the complexity and unprecedented nature of taxing unrealised capital gains. Will you tax anyone else in any other measure on unrealised capital gains?
Look, we have put forward this specific tax, and it is there on its own terms, and we've been very clear about what we're doing in relation to tax policy, and so there's it's not a policy of ours in any other respect. This policy has been in place for 2 years. It's been in front of the Parliament for a fair proportion of that time. It was taken to the Australian people within the last month. So, what we've seen here is the Liberals, in a desperate attempt to find something to talk about, run a smear campaign in relation to this. But fundamentally, this is a policy which has been out in the open for a long period of time.
That faces obviously a clear path with the cooperation of the Greens. I'm just curious though, because if you look at other areas, for example, if you had unrealised capital gains tax on investment properties, it smooths out the revenue, which might appeal to governments. Is that a path you'd ever go down?
They are not policies which the government is pursuing. We are pursuing this specific policy in relation to superannuation accounts with balances.
And no discussions about other areas this could apply to at all within government?
This is a policy which is about superannuation accounts in excess of $3 million, and it is about not removing the concession entirely, but just reducing the extent of that concession. And as I said earlier, it applies to a very small number of superannuants, and that is the extent of the policy. It doesn't go further than that. That's what we put into the public domain. That's what was in front of the Parliament That's what we took to the election, and that's what there is now a mandate for.
Ed Husic and Mark Dreyfus were jettisoned from Cabinet. You effectively made that happen, didn't you?
Look, I'm not going to go into all the speculation which is out there. These are collective processes and they're difficult processes. And the processes are difficult because of something that is good, which is that we have an enormous number of people within our caucus who have considerable talents. We've got many more people within our caucus who could serve as ministers than there are ministerial positions. And so the processes that we go through after every election to choose a ministry are obviously very difficult. I'm really confident about the ministry that has been chosen. I think it's going to do a fantastic job, but in saying that, I very much acknowledge the contribution which has been made by both Mark Dreyfus and Ed Husic, both served with distinction.
Okay.
We are very grateful for their service, as I'm sure are the Australian people, and they have every right to feel proud of that service.
Was Ed Husic too outspoken on Gaza for a Cabinet member?
Look, again, I'm not going to walk down those paths, Tom. Ed Husic has had a distinguished career as a minister in the government, and it's one about which he should feel very proud. As I said earlier, and I've
but he's just been jettisoned, so you're wondering why.
During the course of last week and this. Well,
yeah,
there are, as I said earlier, these are difficult.
Fair enough to want to know how much someone's allowed to talk out when they're in Cabinet? Did he go too far?
Again, I'm not going to walk down that path, Tom, other than to say this. These are very difficult processes because there are so many people within our ranks with talent who have capacity to serve as ministers, and far more people than there are ministerial positions. And it obviously makes these processes difficult. They are collective in nature. That said, the ministry that we have chosen, I'm really confident, is going to perform very well on behalf of the Australian people.
Acting Prime Minister Richard Marles, appreciate your time on this day. Thank you.
Thanks, Tom.